There is a map. It was published in 1802. It covers Philadelphia, and on that map, at the exact coordinates where City Hall stands today, there is a building. Not an outline, not a proposed location, a building, drawn with the same weight and precision as every other structure on that map. Labelled with nothing, just a footprint, just a shape, just the fact of its existence. City Hall, according to official records, began construction in 1874. That is a 72-year gap between when the building appears on a public map and when it was officially built. The map is not classified. It is digitized. It is sitting in the Library of Congress, available to anyone with an internet connection. It has been there for years, and no official body has ever been asked to explain it. Not because the question is dangerous, because the question has never been asked loudly enough. That is where this investigation begins. I want to be precise about what I am and am not claiming. I am not claiming a secret cabal controls history. I am not asking you to believe anything. I am asking you to look at specific, verifiable, publicly available evidence and explain it within the official framework. Because I have tried, and the official framework does not fit. Start with what anyone can verify without specialist knowledge. Take any major city that was founded or significantly rebuilt in the 19th century. Look at its central buildings, the City Hall, the main courthouse, the central railway station, the university, the administrative headquarters. What you will find in every city, on every continent, is the same thing. Massive columns at the entrance, tall arched windows in repeating sequence, symmetrical facades with identical proportional ratios, a dome or a central tower, decorative detailing at the cornice line that follows the same grammar whether you are looking at it in Paris, in Kolkata, in Melbourne, in Buenos Aires, or in San Francisco. Official history calls this neoclassical style, a European architectural tradition that spread globally through trade, influence, and the movement of ideas. That explanation sounds reasonable, until you look at the dates. The Supreme Court of Victoria in Melbourne and the Palace of Justice in Brussels were constructed within a few years of each other. Australia and Belgium. At that moment, several months of ocean travel separated them. There were no shared architectural schools, no documented transfer of plans, no record of the Melbourne architects visiting Brussels, or the Brussels architects corresponding with Melbourne. Official history says, coincidence of style, but style and identical proportions are two entirely different things. Style inspires. Identical proportions mean a common source, and when you begin measuring, not estimating, measuring the proportions are not similar. They are the same. That is not diffusion. That is duplication, and duplication requires an original. But the buildings themselves are only the first layer, because when you map where they sit, something else entirely becomes visible. If you take the position of major administrative buildings across the world's great cities and measure their relationship to the nearest waterfront, a pattern emerges that mainstream urban studies has never formally addressed. Mumbai's Municipal Corporation building sits 340 metres from the waterfront, on elevated ground, main facade facing east. San Francisco City Hall sits 380 metres from the bay, elevated ground, eastern facade. Hamburg's Rathaus sits 310 metres from the Alster, elevated east-facing. 3 cities, 3 continents, 3 different official construction dates, and the same positional logic, accurate to within a few dozen metres. Official scholarship offers an explanation. Universal principles of urban planning. Proximity to water for transport. Elevated ground for flood protection and visibility. Eastern orientation for natural light. Each principle makes sense individually, but universal principles produce similar solutions. What we are looking at here are identical ones. That level of precision does not come from shared principles arriving independently at the same answer. It comes from a shared blueprint being followed in multiple locations simultaneously. The question is not whether a blueprint existed. The evidence says it did. The question is who held it, and who distributed it, and why the distribution happened in such a narrow window of time. Most of these buildings have underground levels, foundations, basement utility spaces. That is standard. What is not standard is what workers found during restoration work on a major administrative building in Delhi in the late 19th century. They broke through the foundation layer, and beneath it they found completed arched galleries, stone columns, decorative cladding, a drainage system, all of it built in the exact same architectural language as the building directly above. The official interpretation: earlier structures on the same site, with the newer building constructed on top of them. But that explanation contains a question it cannot answer. If the lower level is older than the upper one, how are they architecturally identical? Styles change across centuries. Languages change. Construction methods change. Yet the level that is supposedly older and the level above it are visually indistinguishable. One of two things is true. Either an architectural tradition remains so completely static for so long that centuries of separation produced no visible difference, or the lower level was not built centuries earlier. It was built at the same time, deliberately buried, and the building above it was constructed as its continuation rather than its replacement. Official history treats neither of these possibilities as the primary explanation. It simply moves on. Between 1851 and 1915, a series of World's Fairs took place across the globe. London, Paris, Chicago, Philadelphia, St. Louis, San Francisco. Each one featured vast complexes of monumental buildings, pavilions, galleries, fountains, plazas that stunned contemporary observers with their scale and finish. The official account: everything was purpose-built for the fair, then demolished after it closed. The 1893 Chicago World's Fair. 14 monumental buildings covering an area comparable to a large city district, completed in 2 years using the most advanced construction technology of the era: steam cranes, steel frames, industrial organization at scale. And then, after the fair closed complete demolition, not one building preserved, not one repurposed, not a single structure retained from a complex that took 2 years to build and cost a fortune to construct. The question that official history does not answer: why? If you can build it in 2 years, you can maintain it indefinitely. If the technology was advanced enough to construct it, it was advanced enough to keep it standing. The demolition was not a practical necessity, it was a decision. And decisions have reasons. Researchers who have worked through the construction archives of these events consistently find the same discrepancy. The build times do not match the complexity. The workforce records do not account for the finishing quality. The material procurement logs show delivery timelines that would be impossible for new construction at that scale. The alternative explanation is simpler and harder to dismiss than it sounds. These buildings were not constructed for the fairs. They already existed on those sites. The fairs were a mechanism to present them to the public under a controlled narrative scientific progress. The triumph of civilization and the demolition after closing was a way to remove physical evidence that did not fit the official timeline. Easier to tear it down than to explain it. Look at what happens to the buildings just before they are officially constructed. In the archival records of city after city, the same language appears. The site is described as abandoned, vacant, of no established ownership, and then it is transferred to a municipality, to a private individual, to a colonial administration at minimal cost, often for free. Not purchased, transferred, and the new owner does not record a date of acquisition, they record a founding date, as if nothing existed on that site before them. Everyone knows that victors write history. What is less understood is how literally that works when we are talking not about events, but about buildings, about stone, about foundations that are still standing and have not gone anywhere. They simply changed the sign above the door. I want to return to Philadelphia, to the 1802 map to the building that appears 72 years before it was officially constructed. That map is not evidence of a conspiracy. It is evidence of a discrepancy, and discrepancies are not threatening. They are simply the point where the official explanation stops working and the next question begins. The next question is not who hid this. It is simpler than that. If the building existed before the institution that claims to have built it, what institution was there before? Who made decisions in those halls before the people who wrote history walked in? Who sat at those desks, in those chambers, under those domes, before the founding date was written on the front of the building? Those questions have concrete answers. The answers are not in classified vaults. They are in the same archives that are already digitized and already publicly available. The 1802 map of Philadelphia is a Library of Congress document. The construction records of the Chicago World's Fair are in the Chicago History Museum. The Foundation Survey records from Delhi are in the British Library. No one has assembled them into a single coherent picture loudly enough. The buildings are still standing. The proportions have not changed. The underground galleries are still there. The maps are still there. Modern civilization stands, literally and physically, on foundations it did not lay. And the question who built this before us is not a conspiracy theory. It is simply the next question you ask when you look at an 1802 map and see a building that will not officially exist for another 72 years. We are only at the beginning.